most people just don't have the time or the desire to know all this stuff. And that's totally fine. Some people, maybe all they like is gardening. Perfect. Just garden all the time. It's totally fine. But people like yourself and myself, something about us, we want to know the truth. And we are very curious as well. I don't know about you, Charlie, but you probably are very curious like me. And it's like, yeah, I want to know. I want to know what's going on. And it's really hard to like take centuries of information and actually connect all the dots. And in many ways, people like David Icke have been doing that for decades. So he's been a big part of connecting those dots, and we've been connecting the dots ourselves. And once you connect all the dots, and it'll be in the book, it just makes perfect sense what's going on. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's what I see. And then it just becomes obvious. I think that part of the reason, a lot of people are just busy because they're extorted for most of the money they make every year from the mafia called government. Then their businesses are ruined through the mafia called government, putting regulations and all these kinds of things on them. The money system is a total scam. So if they try to save money, they're just going to end up with nothing. So a lot of people are working 2 or 3 jobs, so they don't have time to look into all this stuff. And then you have other people who just don't want to, and that's fine. But I think a big part of it is a lot of people have fear of knowing this information. And there's just only one thing I can tell you, and that is the truth shall set you free. There is nothing to fear from knowing this. In fact, if you really knew the case, it's much more fearful. Like you're in much more danger not knowing the truth, because you're going to be, as Charlie said, one of those people on the beach wondering why the water just went out. While other people who know the truth are like, okay, let's go up the mountain. And so, there's nothing at all to fear, but people do have that fear. I've seen it so many times. Even my own father, I tried to explain to him about what I found out about 9/11. This is around 5 years after 9/11. And I started to explain it to him, and I only got about a minute in. He said, stop. And I went, what? He goes, I don't want to know. And I just looked at him because to me, I'm like, am I your son? Because I want to know everything. Like I find this incredibly fascinating. Yeah. And he said to me, he goes, listen, I just retired. I'm on my pension. I don't want to know this stuff. I just want to enjoy my last few years. And I said, okay, if that's what you want, that's totally fine. But that is the case with a lot of people. They just don't want to know. But for many reasons, as we pointed out, you're much better off knowing all this stuff than not knowing it, because you can be fooled. And for all the religious people who read the Bible, they talk a lot about Satan fooling you all the time. And this system is kind of like a satanic system. I don't know, once you get to that level, how connected it is to, Satan or whatever, but it is a very satanic system. And everything they do is to fool you. And we even have in the book, of course, talking about the CIA director talking about, I think in the 80s, our job will be complete when everything that Americans believe is false. Yeah. They've been talking about this. And it was actually even before that with the Soviet Union guys. They were doing this stuff. Of course, Nazi Germany with the propaganda, Edward Bernays. We talk about all this stuff in the book. But when you see it all laid out, it's pretty obvious where it's all going. And, for anyone who says this is a doom and gloom book, this is, in my opinion, a incredibly inspiring book, because if you didn't know this information, once you're done reading this book, you will have the manual to what is happening on Earth, and you can take the steps to not end up in FEMA camps, not end up genocided, not end up bankrupted, not end up basically under lockdown for the rest of your life, not end up injected with poisons. You will have all this information. So it's quite the opposite of doom and gloom. If enough people read it, and you said we can't stop it, in a way, we could. The people could, but they'd have to wake up a lot more than they are now. We'd need 100 or 1,000 times more, and that is possible. I see that going in that direction. And like I said, once enough people wake up, they won't be able to do it exactly how they want. They'll still try, though. But if enough people know this stuff, their power gets taken away dramatically. And if they make changes, and we talk about this at the very end of the book, what you can do personally, if you walk away from all their systems right now, you stop paying their extortion fees, you stop voting, you stop watching the mainstream media, you stop using their money, because U.S. dollars is not your money. It's the Federal Reserve's money. It's a private company, and it's got a pyramid with an all-seeing eye on it. They're very nefarious and very occult. But that's not your money. Don't ever say they're destroying our dollar. It's not your dollar. But you know what could be yours? Bitcoin or Monero. That actually is yours. It's not owned by anyone except for you. It's actually you become your own bank. So right at the very end of the book, we talk about all these things, and if people didn't know it, it's going to change their lives forever and much for the better, I would think.
Yeah, and there's one of the main chapters that we have identifying the support columns. One of the aspects that needs to be destroyed for this destruction of the empire to happen is the destruction of critical thinking. And I would say that has already been well underway. We are fluorided out of our minds. We're dumbed down with the education system, Common Core, all of that. We've got GMO foods. God knows what they're spraying on us. Who knows what sort of, EMF type technologies. We're walking around in a chemical soup of radiation everywhere. I mean, we are at a severe disadvantage for trying to understand what's going on. But there are a few of us that still have the ability for critical thinking. I put an interesting quote in my first book from Dr. Russell Blaylock, who's a neurosurgeon, and he was talking about how they've dumbed down everybody in the United States to a point where it's just a sea of people that are unable to excel at anything, that have to look to the government for a handout to figure out, to navigate this life. But then there's a small percentage of high IQ people that are like above it and can see the whole plan. And it all makes sense. They can see what's actually going on. But because the masses have been so dumbed down, part of it is not their fault. Part of it is willing participants and dumbing themselves down. I mean, it's a component of this for sure. But if they can get everybody to not know, what's up and down, they keep them, dependent on corporate mainstream media to tell them what's really happening, which we of course know is not the plan. That is entirely preventable. The dumbing down of society is totally preventable. We just have to acknowledge that it's happening to us. So some of this stuff, some of the content in the book forces people to get real about the reality of this situation. They need to take responsibility for their own lives. If you're lacking in some of this, if you've got kids and you're sending them to government indoctrination camps, which are otherwise known as schools, stop referring to them as public schools. Call them government schools. That's what they are. Changes the thing. I had David Rodriguez on my show a couple of weeks ago. Obviously he's at an Acapulco every year. He explains that, real simple steps. This is not brain surgery here. How you can get your kids out of that system. You don't want them in there. We might be giving away a little bit from the book, but you don't want your kids in government indoctrination camps.
Well, I think people are starting to wake up to that now, right? And a lot of them, the schools are actually shut down themselves. There's actually a lot of positives to all this stuff. The government schools being shut down is a massive positive. All of a sudden, kids are at home. They're around their parents again, which is how it's supposed to be. Yep. They realize that learning is something they can do on their own. They don't need to go sit there for 8 hours with a government bureau rat giving them propaganda all day. And I think, homeschooling and unschooling, there's been nothing bigger than this, because even if you did want to send them back to a government school, which is child abuse, in my opinion, now when they go, it's worse than prison. It's like, stand 6 feet apart, have your mask on, you're in your plexiglass shield, you're being reported by other kids. It's basically like jail. Actually, jail's better. I've been in jail a few times. I would rather go to jail than schools, really. And
get a better education in jail.
True, absolutely. Yeah. I was just saying the other day, some of the nicest people I've ever met were in jail, and some of the worst people I've ever met were the cops and the people running the jail. These people are just horrible people.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's off topic. But the point is that there is some positives to all this stuff going on, and people might not even realize they're positives at this point. But if people can start to realize that they don't need the government indoctrination camps. In fact, the government indoctrination camps are destroying their kids. And if they start just even homeschooling right now, and a lot of people are losing their jobs anyway, that could change a lot, because a big part of how we got into this mess is having the government indoctrinate kids for most of their most important years of their life. Even Vladimir Lenin said, "Give me your child for 4 years, and the seed I plant will never be uprooted." And of course, I don't remember if we talked about the Prussian system. I think we did in the book as well. But that's where this whole schooling system came from, right?